And we got orders about 10 o'clock then that night that we were to be ready early in the morning, that the General was making a tour of West Cork. So we got up, we were up about 4 o'clock in the morning, and all was ready, cars and all were out, and we drove down to the Imperial Hotel, and we waited outside the Victoria Hotel for a few minutes, 10 or 15 minutes. But I remember very well that there was a clock in the hall in the Imperial Hotel, and just exactly at 10 minutes past 6, General Michael Collins and General Dalton appeared out the hall and joined us. General Collins and General Dalton got onto the Leland touring car, which was in between the Crossley and the armoured car, the Whippets, leaving them on.
Tell me now, how many men were in the Crossley?
Roughly between 8 and 10 men. She wouldn't hold much more.
And in the Sleeve na Man?
And on the Sleeve na Man, there would be 4 or 5 men. There was 2 drivers. Every car was taking 2 drivers at the particular time, in case that one would be bowled over, that the other man would be there to take his place. So that morning we proceeded on out by Coachford into Bandon, and the main road into Bandon was all blocked. It was out through Lord Bandon's domain we went, and we proceeded down to a place called Clonakilty. But before we came into Clonakilty, about a mile at this side, just where the old workhouse used to be, I think it's now a county hospital, or a sort of a cottage hospital anyway. But before we got into Clonakilty, the whole road was strewn with fell trees, big heavy trees. So we got out to try and pull some of those trees one side, because Collins said there'll be a fair down here in Clonakilty tomorrow, and we'll try and clear this road for some of the people who will be attending the fair. We decided that we couldn't remove all those trees in time, so we had to make a detour and go back right up through the fields and break out at Clonakilty Workhouse. We ran down then into Clonakilty town for about a mile, and he took us in there and gave us our breakfast at one of the hotels in Clonakilty. And it was the first time that I happened to be in Clonakilty. I was quite a young man that time, and it was the first time that I see all the ladies wearing long blue cloaks, the older women having hoods up on their head of the cloak, and the younger women having the hoods thrown back. So I asked a Free State Army officer down there what kind of an order of nuns were they. I thought that they were nuns, and he told me, take care that one of them wouldn't come over there and drop a bomb at your feet, and you'd know what kind of a nun they were then. He says, there's all the women do all the work down here. But anyway, after breakfast we proceeded along to a place called Sam's Cross. It was only just a country public house, and from there we could see where Collins was born, and the remains of the house just over in the fields after being burned down by the Black and Tans. He took us in there and gave us a couple of pints a man, and went up in the parlour, himself and General Dalton with his cousins. The people that owned Sam's Cross were first cousins of Michael Collins. Eventually we proceeded into Skibbereen anyway, and he inspected the troops in Skibbereen. Didn't remain too long in Skibbereen. We returned from Skibbereen right into Clonakilty, and from Clonakilty on into Crookstown. But before we came into Crookstown, we had to come, of course, through Béal na Bláth. And Béal na Bláth is a very wooded kind of a place, was then. Terrible lot of shrubbery going at both sides of the road. And before we just entered into this valley, we were sitting in the Crossley Tender right in front, and a fellow by the name of Barry said to me, who was a soldier sitting beside me, "Igor, Mickey must be getting windy." He says he's getting his rifle ready. He used generally have the rifle thrown down at his feet in the touring car. Well, he got it up and put it by his shoulders, got it ready. And I said to this soldier, Barry, because says no wonder he would be getting the rifle ready, because this is a treacherous looking place, not ever thinking at the meantime that we were going to be ambushed. So we came along through this valley until we came practically to the end of it. And this Lieutenant Smith, the dispatch rider, was in front of us all the time, not going far away, but he just had come down, and he had just returned back again to tell us that there was an obstruction on the road. So we ran, before we had time to pull up, we ran right into the obstruction, which consisted of a 4-wheel horse dray full of porter bottles, and a lot of porter bottles broken strewn around the road, where the vehicle was placed was practically at the end of the valley, at the end of Béal and Bláth. You would be just facing Crookstown at the time, the little village of Crookstown, and we were practically gone right through the valley. We had come well into it anyway, and the Crossley Tender, which was the first, was practically out of the valley where this vehicle was placed across.
How far behind that was the Leland car?
The Leland car would be about 50 yards behind that.
And the Slieve Lemon?
And the Slieve Lemon was practically out of sight, because she was a very heavy car. She wasn't able to travel quite as fast as we were, and at various times during the day we had to wait for Slieve Lemon to come up. She was delaying a terrible lot, but of course she was a terrible heavy car and wasn't able to travel, as I said, as fast as we were. But when we got to where this obstruction was, anyway, the firing started immediately. We had no means of removing the obstruction without getting struck, because the two near wheels were taken out. It was a horse-drawn vehicle, because all the porter drays at that time were drawn by horses. The lorries were rather scarce on the public road, so the whole road was strewn with broken bottles, so that there was no possible chance of making any headway at all without taking good time, and we'd be probably all shot down if we had to come out and clear the obstruction that was on the road. So we laid down inside in the Crossley Tender. It was the only place we had to lie at the moment, but there was a shot fired at the drivers, and it went in one door and out the opposite door. Still, it struck no driver. But I said after a time that we were lying more or less that the Crossley Tender was a target for us, and that it would be better to get out on the road, although there was practically no ditch on the road at that particular time where you could get shelter, only just a stream of water at either side. Yes, we had started firing, but we were actually firing at nothing. We see nothing, but we were firing to where the firing came from, away up on the hills. Although some of the city fellas said to me, who were Dublin lads, that look at the fella, look at the fella, look at the fella. Well, I had fairly good sight at that particular time, and I didn't see any fella exposed, and I don't believe that any fellow up on the hill was so foolish as to expose himself to fire. Anyway, he had plenty cover in bushes and shrubbery of all kinds. It was an ideal place for an ambush. It was made for an ambush. But the firing went on for a considerable time after we getting out on the road. In fact, in all, to take from half an hour to 3/4 of an hour firing, we could see the road being split open. In fact, I honestly believe myself that they could have killed us all if they so wished, but I'm sure the one and only man that they were aiming at, or trying to aim at anyway, was General Michael Collins. He was the only man that they wanted to put out the way. A private soldier didn't matter very much. But after a time, the firing lulled, and we only heard distant shots, distant peals of shots, like away in the direction of Cork. And General Michael Collins stood up and had a gaze around him. He was loading his rifle in the meantime, and whilst he was loading his rifle, one long shot, apparently like from a sniper, rang out and hit him in the side of the head, the right-hand side there, fell down, and he never spoke again. So the firing suddenly opened then just as Collins fell, so that practically nobody was able to go to his aid at that time. And the firing held for about a quarter of an hour after Collins falling in the road. I'd say that he was dead instantly as he did fall, but anyway, General Dalton and the officer that happened to be in the armour car came over to him and rendered him all the assistance that they could. All that they could do was bandage his head, but there was little more that they could do. But